In the quaint town of Ravenswood, nestled in the heart of a dense forest, there lived a young woman named Olivia. Her 30th birthday was approaching, and she had always been known for her love of all things spooky and eerie. To celebrate this milestone birthday, Olivia decided to host a unique and terrifying birthday party that would haunt her guests for years to come. Olivia's obsession with the paranormal had led her to acquire a small, abandoned Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town. The mansion, known as Blackwood Manor, had a dark history shrouded in rumors of malevolent spirits and unsolved mysteries. It was the perfect setting for the nightmarish birthday celebration she had in mind. As her birthday neared, Olivia sent out cryptic invitations to her closest friends, promising a night of fear and dread. The invitations were adorned with eerie symbols, and each guest received a black envelope containing a single tarot card, the Death card. On the evening of her birthday, the guests arrived at Blackwood Manor, their apprehension growing with each step toward the foreboding mansion. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out for them as they entered the grand hall. Inside, the mansion was transformed into a nightmarish tableau of terror. Dimly lit candles cast flickering shadows on the walls, and cobwebs adorned every corner. Olivia's attention to detail was impeccable, and the guests couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of foreboding. The festivities began with a seance led by a mysterious medium Olivia had invited. As they gathered around a creaky wooden table, the medium channeled the spirits that were said to haunt the mansion. Eerie messages and ghostly apparitions filled the room, sending chills down their spines. Following the seance, Olivia unveiled a series of gruesome and horrifying challenges for her guests. They were led through the mansion's winding corridors and hidden passages, each challenge designed to test their courage and sanity. In one room, they encountered a lifelike mannequin that bore a striking resemblance to one of their friends. The mannequin's eyes followed them as they moved, its glassy stare unnerving them. Olivia's friends began to question if they were alone in the mansion or if something more sinister was lurking in the shadows. As they ventured deeper into the mansion, the challenges grew increasingly unsettling. In a dark, mirrored room, they saw their own reflections contort and transform into grotesque and nightmarish versions of themselves. The feeling of being watched became all-consuming, and paranoia set in. In another room, they found themselves in a macabre dining scene, with a long table set for a feast. On the table were lifelike sculptures of severed heads and hands, and a ghostly voice whispered tales of gruesome horrors in their ears. The guests could no longer distinguish reality from the nightmarish illusions that surrounded them. As the night wore on, Olivia's friends began to experience a growing sense of dread and disorientation. Their fear had become palpable, and the line between the real and the surreal had blurred beyond recognition. Olivia reveled in their terror, delighting in the psychological torment she had unleashed. But as the clock struck midnight, the mansion seemed to come alive with a malevolent force. The guests heard the haunting sound of a child's laughter echoing through the corridors, and the temperature dropped dramatically. The medium, who had been guiding them, suddenly screamed and vanished into thin air. Olivia's friends, gripped by fear, tried to escape the mansion, but it had transformed into an impenetrable labyrinth of shifting walls and endless corridors. Panic set in as they realized that they were trapped in a nightmarish reality of Olivia's creation. One by one, the guests succumbed to the psychological torment, their minds unraveling as the mansion's malevolent influence took hold. Olivia's 30th birthday celebration had become a descent into madness, a night of unimaginable terror from which there was no escape. As dawn broke, Blackwood Manor stood in silence, its secrets buried within its walls. The legend of Olivia's birthday nightmare would live on, a haunting reminder that some celebrations can turn into nightmarish ordeals, and that the pursuit of fear and terror can lead to encounters that are best left unexplored. In the sleepy town of Hollowbrook, nestled deep within a forested valley, lived a young woman named Claire. She had always been captivated by the mysterious and supernatural, and her 25th birthday was approaching. Claire decided to mark this milestone by hosting a birthday celebration that would blend the worlds of horror and reality in a way that none of her guests could have ever imagined. Claire's fascination with the paranormal led her to an old, abandoned asylum on the outskirts of Hollowbrook, an imposing structure known as Whispering Oaks Sanitarium. The sanitarium had a notorious history, with tales of mistreatment, experimental procedures, and the restless spirits of former patients. It was the perfect setting for the nightmarish birthday experience she had in mind. As her birthday drew nearer, Claire sent out invitations to her closest friends, each enveloped in black and sealed with a wax seal bearing an ominous sigil. Inside the invitations were cryptic messages hinting at the horrors that awaited them at Whispering Oaks. On the fateful evening, her guests arrived at the imposing gates of the sanitarium, greeted by an eerie silence broken only by the distant hooting of owls. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ominous glow over the imposing structure. Inside Whispering Oaks, Claire had meticulously recreated the nightmarish atmosphere of a mental institution. Dimly lit hallways echoed with the sounds of distant whispers and phantom footsteps. Beds lined the walls, each fitted with restraints, and rusted medical equipment lay scattered about. The guests were immediately thrust into a series of unsettling challenges. In one room, they encountered a life-size doll that seemed to move on its own, its porcelain eyes following their every move. The room itself shifted and distorted, leaving them disoriented and terrified. As they ventured further into the sanitarium, Claire's friends found themselves in a nightmarish recreation of a surgical theater. On the operating table lay a lifelike mannequin, surrounded by blood-stained tools. The air grew colder, and they could hear the ghostly whispers of former patients pleading for release. In another room, Claire's friends faced a wall covered in photographs of former patients, their haunted eyes staring back at them. The photographs seemed to come to life, their expressions contorting in anguish, and the guests couldn't help but feel the oppressive weight of the sanitarium's dark history. As the night wore on, the challenges grew increasingly surreal and terrifying. The guests' sense of reality began to fray, and they couldn't distinguish between the horrors of the sanitarium and their own growing paranoia. In a dark, claustrophobic room, they found themselves trapped in a nightmarish maze of mirrors that reflected their own distorted and grotesque reflections. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the feeling of being watched became all-consuming. In another room, they encountered a recreation of a padded cell, complete with restraints and a flickering overhead light. Claire's friends felt an overwhelming sense of dread as they heard disembodied voices whispering in the shadows, urging them to embrace their madness. As the clock struck midnight, the sanitarium itself seemed to come alive with a malevolent force. the guests heard the anguished cries of former patients echoing through the corridors, and the temperature plummeted to bone-chilling levels. Claire, who had been guiding them, suddenly disappeared, leaving them alone in the darkness. Claire's friends, gripped by fear and confusion, attempted to escape the sanitarium, but it had become a labyrinth of shifting walls and endless corridors. Panic set in as they realized that they were trapped in a nightmarish reality of Claire's creation, and their grip on sanity began to slip. One by one, Claire's friends succumbed to the psychological torment, their minds unraveling as the malevolent influence of Whispering Oaks took hold. Claire's 25th birthday celebration had become a descent into madness, a night of unimaginable terror from which there was no escape. It was the 16th birthday of young Emily, a girl with a heart full of darkness and a smile that concealed her sinister secret. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, had planned a grand celebration in their old Victorian mansion that stood on the outskirts of town. The mansion, with its creaking floors and shadowy corners, was the perfect setting for a night of terror and treachery. As the sun set and the guests arrived, the mansion was transformed into a house of horrors. Cobwebs covered the grand chandeliers, eerie music echoed through the halls, and candles flickered in the dimly lit rooms. Emily, dressed in a beautiful vintage gown, greeted her friends with a wicked smile, for she had always been fascinated by the macabre and the malevolent. The evening began with a ghostly tour of the mansion, led by Mr. Thompson himself. He regaled the guests with tales of restless spirits and hidden secrets within the mansion's walls. Emily's friends shivered with fear as they ventured deeper into the darkness. As the tour came to an end, the group gathered in the dining room for a macabre feast. The table was adorned with gruesome delights: blood-red punch, dismembered finger sandwiches, and a cake that looked like a severed head. Laughter filled the room as the guests enjoyed the horrifying ambience. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered, and the temperature dropped unnaturally. Emily's friends exchanged nervous glances, chalking it up to elaborate party tricks. They had no idea that something sinister was lurking. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. It was Emily's best friend, Sarah. She had gone to the restroom and returned pale as a ghost. She stammered as she tried to explain what she had seen. A blood-stained knife hidden behind the bathroom door. Emily's father, Mr. Thompson, dismissed Sarah's claims, attributing them to the spooky atmosphere of the party. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The party continued, though the unease in the air was palpable. As the clock struck midnight, Emily's friends decided to play a game of hide and seek. Emily, always up for a challenge, agreed to be the seeker. The rules were simple. The others had to hide throughout the mansion, and Emily had to find them. With a sinister grin, Emily closed her eyes and began counting. The guests scattered into the dark corners of the mansion, their footsteps muffled by the old, worn carpets. Emily counted to 100 and then set off to find her friends. One by one, she discovered them, hiding in closets, behind curtains, and under beds. The atmosphere was so tense that even the bravest among them felt a shiver of fear. As Emily approached the last room, her heart pounded in her chest. She could hear faint whispers and giggles coming from within. With a dramatic flourish, she threw open the door, only to find an empty room. Her friends had vanished into thin air. Emily's laughter turned to malevolence, then to triumph. She had them right where she wanted them. As she entered the dining room was bathed in an eerie, crimson glow. The candles had turned a sinister shade, and the temperature had dropped to bone-chilling levels. Emily's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she saw her friends seated at the dining table, their faces pale and paralyzed with fear. But that wasn't the worst of it. At the head of the table sat her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, their eyes hollow and their expressions devoid of humanity. They turned to her with sinister smiles, revealing rows of sharp, gleaming teeth. "Happy birthday, Emily," they hissed in unison. Emily stood there, a wicked grin on her face, reveling in the terror of her friends. The mansion, with all its dark secrets, was her domain, and she had orchestrated this night of horror to perfection. And with that, the night descended into a nightmare of blood and betrayal, as Emily's true nature as a serial killer was revealed. She had lured her friends to their doom, and her parents were her willing accomplices. It was the 12th birthday of Sarah, a quiet and introverted girl who lived in a cozy suburban neighborhood. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, had planned a small gathering with a few close friends in their charming, old-fashioned house. Little did they know that this birthday would take a terrifying turn. The party began innocently enough, with children playing games and feasting on cake and ice cream in the cozy living room. Sarah was the picture of joy as she unwrapped her presents, giggling with delight at each one. The sun was still shining, casting a warm glow through the windows. As the afternoon turned to evening, Sarah's friends gathered around the dining table for a homemade birthday dinner. The room was adorned with balloons and streamers, and the children chatted and laughed, unaware of the darkness that was about to descend upon them. As the clock struck 8 p.m., the power went out. The room was plunged into absolute darkness. The children let out startled gasps and nervous laughter, assuming it was a power outage. Mr. Anderson hurried to find some candles and matches to light up the room, but as the candles flickered to life, they revealed a shocking sight. One of Sarah's friends, Lily, had disappeared. Her chair was empty, and her place setting remained untouched. Panic set in as the children realized that Lily was nowhere to be found. Mr. Anderson tried to calm the kids, telling them that Lily must have gone to the bathroom or wandered off to explore the house. But deep down, he knew something was terribly wrong. The group decided to search for Lily, their footsteps echoing through the dark, silent house. Each creak of the floorboards sent chills down their spines, and their flashlights cast eerie shadows on the walls. They called out for Lily, but there was no response. As they reached the basement door, the children hesitated. The basement was known to be a place of mystery and unease, a part of the house that was rarely explored. But desperate to find their friend, they descended into the darkness, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. In the basement, they made a horrifying discovery. Lily was tied to a chair, her mouth gagged, and her eyes filled with terror. Standing over her was a figure in a tattered, hooded cloak, holding a blood-stained knife. The children screamed in terror, and Mr. Anderson rushed forward, wrestling with the cloaked figure. In the chaos, the cloak fell away, revealing the face of Mrs. Anderson. She had a wild, manic look in her eyes, as if possessed by some malevolent force. As Mr. Anderson fought to subdue his wife, he shouted for the children to run. They raced up the basement stairs, their hearts pounding with fear. They burst out into the backyard, where the neighbors had been alerted by their screams and called the police. When the authorities arrived, they found Lily safe but shaken. Mrs. Anderson was taken into custody, and it was revealed that she had been suffering from a severe mental illness that had driven her to commit unspeakable acts. As for Sarah, her birthday had turned into a nightmare that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She had witnessed the darkness that can lurk within the people we trust the most, a darkness that can shatter the illusion of safety and turn a birthday celebration into a living horror.